truth?
Oh, I'm all ears.
Okay. The truth.
I always tell the truth, even when I lie.
Why do you find it so hard to believe?
Why do you find it so easy?
It's never been easy.
You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth.
All I'm offering is the truth. Nothing more.
Hello and welcome back to Truthful Talk. I'm Marco, back once again with Natalie right across from me.
Hello, Marco.
Hello, Natalie. And back with us via Zoom is, well, for you guys via audio, but back with us online is Derek Rowe, all the way from North Carolina. How are you, Derek?
Hello. Good to be back. Having me on your podcast again.
I have to give you the applause because, you know, because you're back.
Right on.
Absolutely.
So it's good to have you back on. And because I felt like the last time we got to almost like a mid conversation and then we had to stop and it was like, there's so much more to talk about. And of all the things we were talking about, one of the things was the concept of independent film that doesn't get completed. And I know, you and I talk, about it other than on here. But the concept I know you were bringing up to me offline was there are so many things that we can do to maybe mitigate that and prepare better or do things differently so we don't end up with an unfinished product in the end. And I mean, it's amazingly enough, I just had this talk with my university film class yesterday, of directors of, listen, here's how to get something done and here's how not to get something done. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
What was the here's how to get something done and here's not how to get something done?
Yeah, well, basically, because, I hear from so many students. First of all, even, and these are film students or independent directors. And one of the things that I hear that stops them is they don't even get started because they're worried they don't have the right equipment. They don't have the right locations. They don't have the right, the script's not done. There's like all of this stuff. And to me, I always say, well, the problem's always going to be in the edit, regardless of where you start. And so just shoot for the edit, tell the story for the edit. And one of the things I was trying to tell them yesterday is everyone's worried about having a great script. And while I believe story is important, I don't think you need to do a film with a great script. A play, we have to have a great script because, it's going live and that's what we're rehearsing from. And, the story needs to be set. With film, I'm designing that in the edit. I mean, I'm actually creating it in the edit. I just need the right pieces so I can create the story in the edit. I would rather have a good script, like a good concept for a story, and then a great execution of that versus trying to have a great script and then maybe not have the best execution and something that you said. And then we're just going to, have an editor that's just only going to edit to the script. And then we lose the creativity. We lose what's good about the story. We lose great moments. And to me, it's like, just start with a good idea, a good story, and then just go and collect as many pieces as we can. And then from there, hopefully have a good editor that can carry out that vision.
It's your job now. Fix this.
Because I think, I don't know how you feel about this, Derek, but I know for me, if I stay too strictly on the script for, from pre-production to production and then post-production, I lose the flexibility and creativity. And I don't know, I tend to then have frustration in the end.
Yeah, I would say, I think the film that I partially wrote and directed in 2008 was like my first feature endeavor. And it was a lot different than a short film for many reasons. One, just watching it takes 2 hours. So if you're editing a short film, the only way to know if you did any good is to watch it.
Right.
And it takes what, 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
Yeah.
and then you go edit it and watch it again. And still an hour hasn't even passed. So when you're editing a 2-hour film, every single time you watch it, that's 2 hours.
Oh man, yeah.
So it's just like it really does add up. Just like a very basic example of how different it is. And so I remember taking a week off. I like went to my mom's house so that I didn't have to worry about like food. It was just like my mom was like, yeah, you can just stay in your old room. And I just like set up my whole editing station in there. It was like going on like a retreat at my parents' house. And I edited the whole film, I had everything set up. I brought in all the audio, all the takes, all the script notes, looked for the best take, match up the audio, put the scenes together. That's what I got to do, right? I gotta take the script and put it into video form. And then I was like, I'm done. The week was over. I was working literally like all day long, but all those days. And I like sat down in front of the bed to watch it. And like, I wasn't even done with the movie. And I was like, this is painful. Like it was just like it was teaching me in that moment something, which was that every scene had to ask, why is the next scene happen? Right. Like the scenes had to go, why am I happening?
Yeah.
And the beats and the energy and the emotion that's captured on film changes that a little bit from the script. And I was heartbroken, devastation, true devastation after that week. The film had been, we reshoot some of the film. So it's like all this weight and all this expectation of me to have this film cut for this like first premiere of the film. And I'm like, this is garbage. So I learned then like a really hard lesson that like I call it now editing is re-editing. Like it's not until you are re-editing the film that you're actually making the movie, or anything for that regard. But I think what that taught me is that you have to edit to your reaction to the film. Like, how are you going to affect the audience? And when it's a script, it's really sort of a guide to get the performances there, to get the people in the room, to get the camera person to be like, what are we trying to do here? But really what happens after you're all there is the real magic. And that film in particular, there was a lot of improv.
There was a lot, and that's a good point, because I loved this script from the beginning. I thought it was a really good script and a story. And not that every piece of dialogue was great and everything else, but when you bring on some of the actors like we had, right? The great Michael Sepp. I did not expect certain lines of dialogue or improv lines of dialogue, or I just didn't expect certain moments. And it was so much better than I ever could have imagined. Like an actor can bring something that even you as the writer or director be like, oh, wow, I didn't expect that. But that changes the scene. It changes the edit. And I think, as you were saying, Derek, it could change what this scene does to the next scene, or what this scene builds on the last scene. It's when you have actors that are giving so much, and really there was several through that whole project that was like, wow, this is really interesting, right? But it changes it. It does change the script, or at least the initial vision of what is just on a page versus now what you actually have.
You know, it's really interesting for me to talk about, because like I have such an associative mind that like the first thing I think about when I think of like an unfinished film is I start to compare it to like other art.
Okay.
And, you know, as a person who considers like my life part of my art, I'm like, technically my life is like an unfinished film, like constantly. Like when is my life the finished film, right? And so it like through those analogies, I always like try to teach myself like, what do I think about this, you know? And I think about that film, and I think about the experiences we had personally working on that film, and the experiences I had with working with everyone else. And you know what? It's almost like this kind of like discipline that we put on ourselves. We like think we're not allowed, we think we're not allowed to allow the magic to happen, you know? Like,
Okay.
oh, hey, yeah, you guys like pull it back in, like get the scene done.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if anyone's ever done that, but like that is kind of happening to some degree, right?
Yes.
You got your assistant director out there being like, all right, 8 minutes a shot, you know, let's get through it. And I'll tell you something, an aside about that. When I went to a documentary film festival once, and there was a panel, and they were old school documentary filmmakers, and then a filmmaker who wasn't a documentary filmmaker there, who were speaking about the filmmaking process. And really what they were talking about is the difference, like the weight of A roll and B roll. Like, could you make your movie out of A roll?
Okay.
How important is the A roll for a movie? And I can see this in this instance, like how important is the performances versus the edit, right? Kind of the same kind of thing. And one of the points that one of the filmmakers made that was just like so profound is he was like, well, I want to like give him a voice, because he was like, you could tell he was just like seasoned, you know?
Okay.
He was double cooked, right? Like back in my day, you know? And he was like, you know, when I was making movies, like there was a cost to deciding to film. So when you go, all right, we're going to film it, that's money. Money's going out the window when you're hitting record because of the film process.
Yes.
And there's something that changed. And as a filmmaker growing up and learning about this stuff, no one ever talked about this.
Okay.
There's something that changed when digital filmmaking came out that no one really speaks to, which is all of that discipline that you had to make sure everything was ready to hit record. Now's out the window. No wonder we're having trouble with unfinished films. We just film everything. Let's run it.
When you were
hit it, let it go.
When you were learning, Derek, the process of filmmaking, was it already digital, or was it in the transition?
When I was learning filmmaking, it was in a different transition. It had already transitioned. It had already been digital for a while, but it was transitioning from SD to HD.
Okay. Yeah, because I guess digital happened long before sometimes I think, well, when did digital happen? 2010? I'm like, no. It was like 95 or something. It started much earlier, I think, the process, because Lucas did the prequels completely digital. I think that was one of the big things that had, like, on a big level, right? You know, so it's like, okay, if that happened, that was in what, 2000 or something, you know?
I think that's a really important question, because it's not, my experience was video, period. So I think video transitioned much before film did. Film was trying to sell an elevated experience. And there's a lot of like kind of like industry and clout and prestige that goes along with film, that, you know, like even when, I think, what movie was it recently? A film was released on a certain kind of film. The one that just won, that Adrian Brody just won for, The Brutalist.
Oh, The Brutalist.
It was filmed on some kind of special film. Hold on, we have to look this up for people listening.
Yeah, honestly, I haven't seen it yet. I know I should. We should. Have you seen The Brutalist?
No, I want to. I saw The Substance.
You did?
That was wonderful.
It was?
I had a
blast.
Crazy.
Okay. All right. I need to watch. I'm a little bit behind on all that.
All right. VistaVision.
Okay. I don't know what that is.
So it was filmed on VistaVision, which was like a dying technology.
Okay.
Basically at a time when these companies were trying to compete on experience. VistaVision. New wide angle experience, wider than ever before.
Right.
So, you know, selling these execs or these prestigious groups, funding agencies or production companies on using your film not only was a way to stand above the other production companies, but also a marketing lever for the audience. And so when I was getting into video, it was transitioning from SD to HD. And that was actually its first step in competing with Hollywood film, cinema. And so I think that I did, like, my film work has been during the transition of film You're right. That film, the Star Wars films were one of the ones done digitally. And since then, films are even being made now on iPhones.
Right.
Right. So I think that point that filmmaker made at that Q&A, it really, I always think about it, because now it's like, no, we really should have that discipline in a new way, because I think that discipline actually brought a defense against unfinished films, because they were making sure that all of these things were prepared before they hit record, highly reducing the amount of post-production work that would be needed in order to get the good take. And one of the things I was talking to you about before getting on that I wanted to bring up to y'all is, okay, so we can film anything we want now.
Right.
Now, this can apply to any art form, but all of us here, we have experience with like acting and filmmaking and theater. So theater has a lot to teach us about film.
Yes.
Because theater is all about you turn on the lights, you start the show, the show goes until the end.
Right.
There's no unfinished theater.
It's very linear in its process. Not, storytelling can jump around, but we start the show and it goes for what, an hour, 2 hours until it's done. You're right. We don't stop. The show must go on.
Yeah,
There's no
such
escaping.
thing as unfinished theater, unless someone literally gets broken or dies.
They basically.
Yeah, I always say that, right, the show must go on, meaning everything must move forward. I always say, like, when I'm teaching actors, we do not ever stop, whether it's a take in a film or on stage. We do not ever stop unless we're medically unable to continue. That's the only thing that should ever stop us, is being medically unable. So even when I broke my finger on stage, that was an inconvenience. But we keep moving forward. The scene does not stop. It just, the character broke his finger.
Oh my God.
Knock on wood.
Knock on wood, right? But it's like, hey.
Wait, so you broke your finger?
Oh my goodness. He
you
doesn't
don't know
know.
the story? So in Superior Donuts, what was that? 2017, I guess. In Superior Donuts, towards the end of, do you remember that play, Derek? When we were in it, it takes place in a donut shop, and I was the antagonist, and I come in at the end and have like a fight sequence with Alan, who I forget his character's name now, but the shop owner, and we have this kind of crazy, almost farcical fight sequence, but it was a lot of fun. But it's a long sequence, and there are punches thrown, and I get stuff broken over my head, and we get thrown over the counter. It's kind of ridiculous, right? It was fun.
Yeah.
In the very beginning of that sequence, Alan's character, Arthur, comes up and kind of like he's egging me on for a fight. And then I turn around and I shove him and he falls down. Well, on this one night, it was a live show. This one night, it was early on in the run. I go to shove him. And so a stage shove is palms to kind of like right below your shoulders. It's very safe and it doesn't hurt anybody. And the person that receives it is the one that does a stage fall. And so I go, but I didn't get my fingers up in time on this one night. I don't know if it was just adrenaline or if I was out of position, but my finger goes and kind of hits him right there. And it jammed, just like, I don't know if you've ever jammed your finger, right? It hurts. It's not a big deal, but it hurts, but it jammed. But at my aging body, so when you jam, your finger is flexed straight, like the tendon on top is holding it straight. And then you're forcing it to bend. So when I hit him with the force and it forced the finger to bend, the tendon on top was still holding all of that in, and the tendon worked. It broke the piece of my bone on the tip of my pinky. It broke it and pulled it off, and basically just disconnected my whole finger until it just went limp.
Whoa, that was a really detailed explanation of the physical thing that happened in your finger.
Yeah.
That's intense.
I went, and it was a snap. It happened
Oh
so
my
fast,
goodness.
and I felt it. And then I turn around because in the actual blocking, I turn around and go towards the door. I push him down, and then I'm like, okay, that's enough. And then I turn and I look down, and my finger's just like hanging. And so I have to tuck it into the rest of my palm. I kind of like make a fist and like hold my pinky in to protect it. Because the next thing that happened as I'm walking out the door is Alan's character. He jumps on my back. And that's the start of the fight.
In the beginning.
And then we have to do this entire fight sequence with a broken finger. Now, I don't know it's actually broken. I know I did something to it. And I know it
Something's
hurts
wrong
really
with your
bad.
pinky.
And we go and we do the whole sequence. And then I get back into the green room and I show my stage manager and she's like, your finger's broken. And so she has to, you know, that was Megan and she had to then splint it for me and everything else. And then I go to the doctor the next day and then ends up, it's broken. And then they have to, they did surgery on it. And they had to put,
I can't think of a better example of a reason why a movie would be unfinished, right? Like,
well, that's the
I broke
difference.
my finger, can't do it.
Yeah. How am I going to type? How am I going to click the mouse?
Difference.
I'm going to edit. I'm going to do anything.
You know, for most actors, if this was a take in a film, you do that and you immediately stop the take because it's like, my finger, right?
Yeah, the rest of the day's cut. We got to figure it out. Then we got to like get everyone back to do reshoots or like get the party started again. And so that is such a good example. So what I started doing after our last call is I was like, so what are some things that you can do as a filmmaker to stand against? Because really what it becomes, it's more of the producer's job, but really like your job becomes, how do I make sure this isn't added to the list of unfinished films? And so some of the things I started finding, like doing research, is films that are being made now in like a hybrid form to not just reduce how much work it is, but also to capture compelling performances.
Okay.
So I read about a film I read an article on IndieWire. It was like how a director made a sci-fi marvel in 5 days with no script and no budget. I've heard stories like that.
Wow.
Since I first got into film. And as an indie filmmaker, you can't not read that article because you're like, I have to know, right? Like, I need to know how they did it so that I can do it.
Absolutely.
But when you read the story, I haven't seen the film, but basically it's like kind of like theater. Like you basically set things up so the theater can happen, and then you capture it in a way that will be a film.
Yeah.
And this morning I was just watching a little bit of it before our call today. It's called My Son, and it's a film with James McAvoy. And here's what they did in this film. So it's not completely improv. They took the main character and he does not have a script. So everyone else scripted, set up, they know what they're doing.
Right.
But the main character the film is happening as it's happening to him. And the idea, and the director even says this in a quote, is to take the first take.
Yes.
So it's not theater, but it's taking something from theater to not just reduce post-production, but capture a genuine human reaction on camera. And so I just think there's something really cool about that.
What you're reminding me of was the first time that I was introduced to Borat or Bruno. So the element, right, of how he was able to improv, but I'm sure he had something loose guideline wise, but regardless of what it was about. Initially, of course, my own personal preference was different. Even though I think he's a genius, I still think about it when I'm like staring out into space sometimes. Like, how did he do that? Because there was an allowance of having that theatrical element to it and just kind of letting the camera just follow and let's capture.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Totally. That's a really good example of that magic. Like the magic is created there. I've even heard stories about how like in E.T., when Drew Barrymore first reacts to E.T. in the closet, it was all set up so that Drew Barrymore did not know what E.T. looked like.
Aww.
It was very protected. And Drew Barrymore did not know that that's what was going to happen.
Right.
So they were trying to protect that moment that now is seared into popular culture, maybe not anymore, but film culture. There's something there. And so it makes me wonder, like, we do things as professional artists. We're like, all right, cool idea. How do we make it a movie? Whatever that is, we're like professionalizing it or like molding it into this thing that we can wrap our heads around. It's like, cool idea. How's it a script? Or cool script. How is it a visual story? Right. Cool. I'm glad you got all that footage. How do we edit into a compelling film that's 90 minutes that we can sell on the market?
Right.
It's almost like there's an opportunity to add an additional step there, which is how do we infuse the production's ethos so that this film reduces post-production labor, gets finished, and captures genuine emotion.
That's the question. How do we? Because producers, we talked about producers. Producers have to make sure everything gets done, but producers aren't as involved as much in post. Right. So, I mean, you have producers that are helping you through pre-production. That's really their job. And then they help you through production. But then, as we talked about last time, in the edit, the editor's left alone for, it's like, okay, you have to get to the next edit and then we'll review. And as an editor, you're there by yourself. And that can be very difficult and frustrating, and not having the support and not having what you need. And so it is an interesting question. How do we do that? But I do like what you're saying, because that's part of what I was trying to tell my students yesterday was, don't worry about a great script. Just have a good, solid concept of a story with something you want to tell. Has to be, I think for a director, it has to be something personal you want to tell. Like there's a point to making this film or anything, to a play, to a film, to whatever a song you're writing. There needs to be a point to it. And then once you have that point, get the best actors you can that can just bring it to life. Now, have you seen The Florida Project?
No, I put that on the list.
Okay, good.
Of us to talk about, basically Tangerine, Florida Project, this film, My Son, this film called Coherence.
Well, I mean, Tangerine, The Florida Project, and now Anora, all the same director, writer.
Wow.
Right? It's Sean Baker, who Tangerine was done with the iPhone. And so it's all done there, and all, very, very low budget. Florida Project, which was shot in Kissimmee, Florida. Again, very low budget. And the cool thing, like as you were saying, taking the first take, there weren't many takes. And he's dealing with children.
Because a lot of the people weren't even actors.
Well, they're all kids.
Right.
With the exception of like Willem Dafoe, who was nominated, by the way, for an Academy. Yeah. But I mean, it was just, he didn't worry about, the one thing I loved about it, because I thought it was a really good story. One thing I loved about it is they weren't worried about crazy cinematography. It wasn't like they had these rigs with these slow moves and everything else where you have to do it like 20 times because of technical reasons. It was just, go out there with a camera and shoot these kids doing what kids do. And the children, who were not really actors, were amazing.
Give them Oscars.
And because they were, as you said there, Derek, it was like, we're not going the 10th take in where acting starts to get a little more jaded and starts to get a little more technical.
Totally.
It was just, let's shoot them very naturally in their environment, and then we're going to edit to that. And it was so well done.
I have a question. Let's say you're filming something. How would you guys feel about editing pieces of what you captured that day, that night?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Sometimes that is done with a different editor, usually. Sometimes the same editor, but they basically call those dailies.
Yes.
And what would be happening is that editor would be going through the dailies, just pulling out what you shot and going along with the script notes and just being like, here's what you had said. You said this one was great and this one was kind of good. And I like put them both on the dailies or something like that. I have heard of some productions, indie and like Hollywood level films, doing dailies where they are getting both a high resolution capture that day and a lower resolution capture that's immediately going to an editor, and they're quickly piecing together some sequences to go, did it work? Like, did that work? But really, that I don't know. I think it probably depends director, but I think usually those are to save the fact that sometimes in production you're filming the last scene a week before the first scene, and you're trying to go like, does this work?
Right.
You know?
Does it even, do we have all the pieces?
Yeah.
It is, if the director is the editor, it's very difficult just from a time standpoint. Because you're on set all day, and then after set, you're preparing for the next day.
Yeah.
You just don't have time to do the edit. If you have a separate editor that understands your vision and can prepare these kind of mock-ups, then I think it can be very valuable.
Yeah. It's just interesting to me to, let's say, have, whether it's time management, however you would call it, but a way to address a possibility, an issue where you're having magic that day that was better than what was written. And you're like, holy shit, I don't even know. So it's like I don't want to say plan B, but something that you can have to avoid any unfinished business towards the, I don't know, just a way to help, I guess. Like,
it can, if you have the right team. You need to have the right people in place. And then
it's a lot for one person.
It is a lot to one, because just taking, even in the digital age, well, of course, in the film age, you couldn't do that because you had to process the film. They would capture it in a video format separately just to look back as the dailies, but you needed, it was very low res and whatnot. But even now in digital, you have to process the footage. Not that it takes as long as it did for film, but it does take some time to process that and get it ready to then be able to view.
Even view,
Yeah, it's so normally they watch it back in camera now, or what I like to do is have somebody on set just like with an iPhone or something, or a smaller camera like a Sony Handycam or something, something like very pocket. And while we're filming, film it separately so we can just watch back kind of what we're getting, just like the performance and things like that. But it is difficult. It's a longer road to get to the point of starting to edit. Now, I'm a big fan of processing your footage as you shoot it,
right?
Like having a third AC or somebody in the camera department that's taking the cards. And every so many minutes, every 30 minutes or so, they're taking a card and they're processing it. They're organizing it. They're starting to proxy it. They're like, there's a lot that needs to happen, and then back it up several times. Because now in the digital age, back up your footage several times. But that all takes time.
Yeah.
So there is an interesting subject that we could talk about here, is like how technology is changing that now. So let me give you an example. So recently I learned about a brand called Strada, Strada.
Okay.
And they created a filmmaking product that can log your footage and visually analyze it.
Okay.
So that you can then in the editing process, search for what you want. So you can say, oh, I want to take where someone was screaming, for example. And it would pull up all the shots where someone is screaming. The reason I bring this up is because in my documentary film work, this was big.
Yeah, sure.
We filmed for days in certain environments and talked about subject matter that spanned the course of 1,000 hours of footage. So if someone said, like, oh, some of these, referencing something, and I could be like, oh, we have a lot of different footage from our project of that thing they're talking about. Good luck going and finding it, right?
Yeah.
And so we had to do logging processes that I worked in collaboration with the co-producers of those films to basically literally go through every shot we made, delete the stuff that's just like, oh, the camera wasn't supposed to be on. Log the stuff with categories that we did capture.
Right.
So that in the edit, if I'm like, oh, I really could use another angle of this, that from the exterior of this, I could look through the logs exterior in that location and see if there were any clips. Now, when I met with this company, I brought up to them that in more fictional filmmaking, that's not as much of a thing because you're going to the script, there's only 5 shots of this one thing to choose from. But it seems that now in social content, when people are making like super cuts or cutting together clips of all kinds of resources, that they're telling stories through B-roll essentially. And if they want to find a footage of, the sun setting in Africa to make their point, what they're saying, then they can search through all this footage through like basically AI analysis. And so it does seem that if you could do that, then it would solve this like kind of like backlog of post-production, like going through and editing and whatnot. But it really, I think in the greater form brings up this idea of like, can we use technology? Like, is technology's advancements saving us from unfinished films? Or do we still have to have some kind of artistic discipline? And the reason I think even in bringing it up, I personally know my answer because I feel like it's why the director is such an important role in a film.
Yeah.
And it's not because of all the reasons that people might think. It's not because like, oh, they have a perfect vision. The thing I learned on my first feature film project is the director is the one that has to make the decision.
Yeah.
Because we can't all make the decision.
Correct.
Right.
We want a leader to make the decision so we can all run toward it.
Yes.
And that's really where it's like the director's goal to set a sort of like precedent on the project that, okay, we're going to do all this stuff to get a first take.
Yeah.
And so I think even with the technology, I think you just sign yourself up for, let's say we had AI and we could film a movie completely improv and then dig through it later in the editing. Yeah, that's going to make it easier, but still it's not necessarily transferring the magic that was created by bringing people together on the screen. And that's what I think for me was like the inspiration of talking with you all today is like, it's like talking about it's about the strength, like the artist's role, like, oh, well, I'm an artist. Okay. The artist's role is to have the strength, not the vision necessarily, maybe vision, but the strength to stand to protecting the magic when everybody else wants you to get it moving, man. When's it done? We only got this actor till 2. You're gonna have so much to do, or that's not how they did it, or whatever reason that everyone is gonna have to push you into a direction. To stand strong and say, I need to protect the magic. So this is what we're doing. That's hard. That's hard to do.
That's really interesting. So discipline is so important, and preparation, organization. And I think about how technology in the past was supposed to help us. So before we had computers, people had messy desks and papers all over the place. And it's like, oh, well, computer's gonna completely save that because everything will be digital now. And what ends up happening is now you have everything in your computer, but you can't find it because you're disorganized in your computer folders and stuff's everywhere, all over your desktop.
You weren't ready for that level of needing the organization. Like, oh my God, I need an MBA to know how to organize my computer.
If we think about the technology that does exist for all sorts of things, it's kind of like if you're a messy or dirty person or something like that, well, all the technology, like, listen, you can not have dust in your house because the Swiffer exists and you can, like, it's a duster and you can just dust. There's vacuums that exist. But you have to use it.
Yes.
It's not about the technology. It's about the discipline of using the technology. So I agree. I think we have to have a greater discipline, almost go back to actual film, not actual film by shooting, but the process of being prepared to shoot. So we know what we're shooting. So we're not just overshooting and saying, we'll figure it out in the edit. But we know exactly why every shot is important, what we need out of the actors. We need to go back to rehearsal and figure it out before we shoot, which there was a lot more rehearsal when it was film.
I was going to bring that up as well, about having the type of level of actors back in those days where they were all basically very well educated in acting in theater. That was what they've chosen to do. Al Pacino, I think, all those people back in the 70s that were ready to rock and roll always. So having that type of quality actor mixed with the director that's willing to follow their, I wouldn't say their vision, but their openness, but also at the same time, that other side of the brain that needs to have strategy. You need to set yourself up for success at the end. So like what Derek is saying about filming everything, putting in the computer and then dumping it over to the editor, which might be you as the director, is literally decision fatigue. Your brain can't now. It's this film can be anything.
Yeah.
Now, because it's better than what I thought it was, because I didn't think the actor was going to do these things. But now it's overwhelming. Now it's just, how do you get that done?
I think that is the question that I was like really excited to ask here with y'all today, because I think it's like almost like one of those things where you remind yourself to like be present, like if you notice that you aren't present, being like, oh man, I should really be present right now. It's like nothing that I don't believe that could always be present, but I actually really like reminding myself to be present. And so I think that's where kind of like the discipline comes in. Is it's like a friend of mine told me once that in poker, you always have to have some kind of like angle, even though statistically speaking, it doesn't make sense. So if you were to say, I always play jacks, right? Statistically, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But we need the way that our minds and the way that our energies work. We need scope. We need a mission. And so you can swear by your, I always play jacks, because it gets you in the game and elevates or creates peaks and valleys in your energy and confidence to win.
Right.
And so I think that coming up with a strategy, just like you mentioned, Natalie, I think it reminds me of a big discussion I had with a producer on my first feature documentary, Within Reach. She was a very like organized, plan-oriented person. And I am exactly the opposite. Not organized, not plan-oriented.
Right.
So we would often have these like discussions, and both of us were very respectful of the way that the other person did things, but we would find ourselves at a loss because we'd be like, well, what do we do? Like, this is how you think it needs to be done. And this is how I found it works for me. I don't think I'm wrong. I think you're right, but I don't think I'm wrong. And so the mantra that we came up with, that she basically came up with and brought it to our sort of like our co-creative team, is a concept of plan well and go with the flow. So you create the plan as best as you can, but then you allow yourself to go with the flow, because if you don't, it's not going to be very good.
Nope. And momentum is a big thing. It's a huge thing.
Yeah.
It's an invisible energy that's happening. Either you're doing or you're not. And with projects that you guys make as movie makers, I can't imagine. I haven't been a part of something as large as that at all. But all I do know is that working with like-minded folk in regards to, why are we doing this? Your commitment to this, right? So people that are all involved in the same vision, like moving forward, that's like the people you have surrounding yourself with making these projects, I think is just as important, because it does take a team. And I think you directors, you put a lot on your own shoulders, which I respect. But I don't know how you guys do it, honestly, because.
Well, if you've been around a lot of theater, and it's really not that different in the process. It's just that in theater, we do all the preparation up front. And then, if we think about it, theater is showing the edit live, right? That's what we're doing in theater. We do all the preparation before that.
Right.
So, but you've been involved as far as, Nat, I mean, all the crazy preparation of theater, and what it takes
with you directing it. Yes, absolutely.
To that point. Well, me or anyone else.
Or anyone,
but
yeah.
But what I'm saying is that's the level of preparation it takes. And you could also do theater without doing that level of preparation.
Mm-hmm.
But is it going to be as good, and is it going to be where we want it to, and is the audience going to like it, and is it,
Right.
And so I think that's where film is too. The greater preparation we have, at least knowing what we want to shoot and how to get there and everything else.
Well,
but then
I think I've even noticed recently, y'all, like in other regards, like as a creative director right now, the work I do is like so different than filmmaking, but I'm still to some degree, the association there is that I'm still carrying people along. Like they're it's not me in a room. I'm still having to keep people engaged to create something that we all like. And what I've noticed is the reason I didn't want to be a creative director is because creative directors that I've experienced in the past, they like would create these like brand guidelines, and like they would seem to me like they had too much rigidness or strictness, and I never felt like they were speaking to like, well, this is the magic of what happened. You have a lot of points how that isn't like what you wrote down in the beginning,
right?
But like, look what happened. And that always made me feel like, I don't know, I don't like them. I don't like this process. And I've taken that with me, like now that I'm doing this. And what I've noticed is if we come away, oh, you hired me to be creative director, I'll see you in 2 weeks. If I go away and I do my work, like so much research and thinking and trying, and then I present back to them something, it's always doesn't go over well. Always. It's always just like, huh, that's different. Okay. But if I don't do any of that, literally delete those 2 weeks, invite them on a call, and they're like, what are we going to do on this call? I don't know if I really want to talk about like, I don't know, like color and stuff like that. I'm like, no, we're going to do that. I invite them on the call, and literally all I do is we share our screens, and I pull up something and I go, what do you think about this?
I love that.
Like, and they're like, yeah, this is kind of cool, but I don't like that thing over there. And I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. And I'm like, well, what, that reminds me of this. I think this is pretty cool. They're like, yeah, that is cool, but it's like, it's too much blue. I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. But if the blue wasn't there, and then at the end of that hour call, I got so much more done in that interaction without those 2 weeks of work, and they love it.
Right. That's wonderful. That's so awesome.
And it's really taught me about like to respect that time, that like it is okay as an artist to set yourself up for the magic moment and then print the magic moment. Print it.
Oh, that's great.
Because the only art is all finished art is abandoned. It's never done. Right. You can always look at it. If like that's the problem with unfinished film is me and Marco go back and look at a film we didn't finish for like, I don't know, I kind of want to change everything.
Right? Well, actually, we can go back and look at things we've finished, and it's like, there's more to be done.
Exactly.
Even
so
when
I
it's
think
done,
like knowing that and empowering yourself to say, all right, I'm going to plan as much as I can for the moment, and then we're going to print it, and that's it. I think I'm going to encourage myself to do that more, because I just think that there's something there that you just you couldn't plan to happen. You couldn't plan for that magic.
Right. And that's where go with the flow is important.
Right.
Is we start off with a plan. It's like, this is the direction, but then we have to be able to flow within that direction. Because otherwise, if we're too strict to it, well, we're going to miss out on opportunities. We're going to miss out on discoveries. We're going to miss out on creativity. We're going to miss out on so much if we're just trying to execute something that we did in pre-production, or, whatever you want to call it. So we have to, as you said, go with the flow. I think that's such an important piece of information. Allow it to adapt.
Film has a lot to learn from theater.
And,
I just to add in there, I think one of the things my brother has taught me, and you both probably have seen this in other regards, is there's almost a social contract, an unspoken contract sometimes that we're all like accountable for. And if we don't speak to it, then we can't change it. And one of those unspoken contracts, I think, is that when you're doing something for someone, like they're paying you as a service or or something like that, that you have to do something at a certain level. And then if they want to change it, you have to change it. Right.
Mhm.
And, you know, in the video work that I do, revisions is usually what it's called.
Yeah.
Some people do like 3 rounds of revisions or something like that. But everyone who works in the field knows that revision 15, you're like, I thought we only said 3 revisions,
Yeah.
right? Because in the end, you want everyone to feel happy with it. So you'll do whatever you have to do to get there.
Mhm.
And my brother had always like would tell me, he goes, I can't do this, man. Like, I'm spent. I did it already. Like, you're saying revisions. Like, I went in, you said do this. This is what I can do.
Mhm.
This is what I made. I stayed up all night and this is what it is. I would like that to be what goes to the client.
Mhm.
End of story. And, you know, I fought with that a lot because of the unspoken contract and the expectations of business. But I think I've come much closer to speaking up front to that. And I know a videographer who legitimately charges for revisions, period.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And his way of saying that is just like this whole conversation. If I say you pay for revisions, they will work harder to make sure the first version is right.
I love
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, setting it up for success. That's
Yeah.
great. You're putting money where your mouth is, or all that stuff. And then what you're talking about, talking to someone with the computer, meaning is you have someone collaborating with you in real time, unbeknownst to them. But psychologically, people feel very special when they're asked to it. What do you think about this? Well, really, they have value into it. There's input that they have.
And they don't do that. I'm actually doing creative direction research while I'm asking them that.
Yeah.
But it invites everyone into
Yeah.
doing the work. And I think that I've learned a lot from that process. And, you know, I think now I definitely take it seriously. I think what I do now is I tell people up front, I don't like to do revisions.
Mhm.
I think revisions is evidence that we didn't do the work up front to get on the same page.
Bam.
I will do revisions
Mhm.
because in the end, I want this to be good. I want to think it's good and I want you to think it's good. But I want to get it right the first time. That is my goal. And I think you have to invite them into the play,
Mhm.
the spirit of it all.
Mhm.
Because if you don't, if you're like, all right, team, gonna go away to edit the film, gonna see you in 3 months, right?
Mhm.
I hate to tell anyone listening, ain't gonna go good.
Right.
Just saying.
Well, and I think it speaks to, you know, bringing it to film, the problem that most independent film or even student films, like, you know, on that lower level, or maybe even in the professional level, is that everything is overshot. It's like, we'll figure it out later. And there's right. It's not like, let's get together and figure out what this should be. That's the form of revision is, you know, we're going to shoot so much footage and then we'll revise it 1,000 times in the edit. And it's like, no, and that's when it doesn't get done.
There it is.
It doesn't get done in the edit because there's too many choices. There's too many pathways. We didn't think it out. We don't even know what this is, and things don't piece together because we didn't even know what it was when we shot it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that leads to so much more, barricades later.
You know, you all are making me think about this little funny project I've been doing on Instagram lately, the free parking project.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone's been asking me, like, Derek, what is this? What's going on? And like, I don't have a really good answer. Like, my answer kind of changes every time. It's like, it's just like, it's something I'm trying to do. And I think this conversation has really made me see it. It's so related to this, y'all. It's because I've spent years, both feature documentary films I worked on took 5 years to make.
Right.
And I'm tired of it. I loved that work, but I'm tired of doing that.
Yeah.
And I've seen now a whole new world of social media now has redefined the visual medium.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go try to get Instagram or TikTok and go to try to make a film with it, like I'm going to go make a film with TikTok, like the app.
Right.
What you quickly learn is how incredibly painful it is to do editing and how difficult it is to search through your takes and search through a long take where you did something multiple times for the right take.
Mm-hmm.
So what it conditions you to do is what we talked about earlier. You don't hit record until you're ready.
Yeah.
And when you hit record, that's the clip. That's the clip that's going in your edit.
Right.
And so to some degree, this free parking project for me is me trying to allow those disciplines that are teaching people about filmmaking today to affect me. And at the same time, in Durham, there's this conversation about whether charging for parking is affecting downtown culture. And I know lots of cities charge for parking, and I know that it's something someone has to pay for the parking. But the way things go now with politics, it's like no one's ever saying actually what it is. Like everyone has an angle and everyone's got a conspiracy theory because of that angle. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to practice like what happens in my mind when I go, I want to make a film about parking downtown and whether or not it's affecting things. What am I going to do with that question? I'm going to go like, maybe I'll go get some footage of what people have to think. Instead of making a film, I just go and like be like, hey, what do you think about parking? And they're like, sucks. And then now that's a clip. That's a clip on free parking. So instead of like condensing it down into this project that could be unfinished, it's a project that unfolds with each idea. So to me, it's almost like I'm like, I don't know. I'm like trying to get myself to like believe in it again as the world is changing. And I'm having a killer time. Like I don't even know what it is, but I'm having so much fun.
Because you're in the unknown.
Yeah.
It's just like, what is it? Unknown.
Wild.
That's great. It's pure creativity.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
So believe it or not, we're just about out of time. That's crazy because I feel like we're just getting rolling here. So we're Derek, we're going to have you back to finish this conversation.
Please.
Or maybe continue this conversation. Maybe not even not finish it. Because I would love to talk more about maybe things we can do, like very specific things we can do. I'd love to give tips to filmmakers out there, give tips to actors of what they can do, because there's so much. But I think maybe a bottom line that we can give today is better preparation, just across the board, like knowing what we're doing. One of the things I do want to talk to you about further, we can't get into it today, but we used to have something in Doctrine, and I loved it. And it was something you came up with, and it was called What's the Why? And because you used to bring that to meetings. We used to go to a meeting with a client, and a client would always be like, this is what we want. And Derek would be like, wait, why do you want it? And it was such a simple thing because many times they didn't know why. They just wanted a video without knowing why.
He's shaking his head.
But true. It's so true.
And I remember that was, to me, that was such a huge paradigm shift in my mind of like, oh, wait, we're not just going to a client and saying yes and creating a video. We need to know what the video is for. What's the purpose of the video? And I think that could be true for film or for anything else. And not that like your free parking, not that it has to be so definitive of why you're doing it. Sometimes it's just creative. I just need a creative outlet. That's all, that's the why, is I want a creative outlet to express what I'm feeling. But I think it's important that in filmmaking, I think, well, why are we making this film? What's the point? So interesting.
I mean, I think you just set up the subject of our next conversation, like find your why.
I love that.
Find your why.
I love that. That was, I believe, the foundation of the Department of Creativity too. That was started. That you had started.
Yeah, I think I'm really glad that you brought that up, and I think in the end, I think it's like the core, like we talked about, like scope, how important scope is for a project.
Yeah,
and having the discipline to stand by and protect the magic. And like, really, you only can have that strength. You can only have that discipline if you are connected to the why of the project.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I would love for us to come back again. Clearly you all can do podcasts with other people, but it would be interesting maybe to invite a few people to have this conversation.
Okay.
Like why? Like, tell me what you worked on recently. Cool. I'll talk about my project. Why? Why'd you make this? Why Why are you torturing yourself?
Yeah. I think that's such an important question for any artist out there. Why are you doing this?
Mhm.
Yeah. What is the point? So, and I think if we start with that question, not end with that question, but start with that question,
Mhm.
it will help us be better prepared for what we're doing. I love that.
Couldn't
So
agree more.
we're definitely going to get you back on then, Derek, so we can have that conversation and probably many more. I mean,
Anytime, y'all.
all right. Well, we'll have to schedule something
Yay.
again with you. But we're out of time, Nat. You believe that?
Bananas. No, I
It
can't.
goes fast.
It was good to see you, Derek.
Good to see y'all too.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. It's great to be with you once a week. We will be back again soon. We'll also schedule a new time for Derek to be back with us so we can tackle the what's the why question. So stay tuned for that. And until then, remember to treat yourself with kindness and treat each other with kindness too. It goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
And also remember to reward yourself for the risk that you take. All right, we'll see you all in a week. Bye, everyone. If you'd like to learn more about our studio and what we do, you can find us online at truthfulacting.com. And check out truthfulactingonline.com for our Learn at Home at Your Own Pace courses.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
You must unlearn what you have learned.
I know what you're trying to do.
I'm trying to free your mind, but I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it.